Hello again, La-di-das and national spectators. Welcome to another episode of the La-di-da Times. I am Jeff Cougar Koslowski. Joining me once again is Marcus Razorback Dickson, player, umpire, researcher, announcer. You see him on the hill, you see him behind the plate. We are much appreciated in having him coming on and sharing his expertise because, boy, we've got a fun one coming up. How you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, this is going to be something. You know, we have some specialty games coming up here. The Nationals will be re-emerging from a 10-month period of what I can only assume would be recuperation, a time of hibernation. Boy, the Nats, they come out swinging, they come out flying, and then they disappear into the mist. That's great times. For those who don't know, not to pull the curtain back, but every member of the historic baseball program at the Henry Ford has both a La-di-das and a Nationals jerseys. So then everybody is a La-di-da, everybody is a National. Some people have a far greater attachment to the Nationals, especially in their early days when it was, when the La-di-das were the club and the Nationals were kind of like the redheaded stepchildren. And so some people kind of identified and liked the idea of being the redheaded stepchildren, but they'll be back. The Nationals are coming back. Marcus, do you have any, what are your memories of being a National in some of these Walnut Grove games?
Oh my goodness. When I started playing in the second year of the Nationals. And the first year, they were truly two different clubs. And the La-di-das had all of the experienced players, and the Nationals had all of the new players. And so the Nationals were sort of like the Philadelphia Generals that the Harlem Globetrotters beat badly every game. And so the year that that I started was the first year that we had the process you describe of everybody's a La-di-da and everybody's a National, and we divide the clubs up. So it's always been kind of fun in that regard to just get to play in the different in the different uniforms. The Nationals came out of the small town of Parma. The original Nationals came out of Parma. But one of the things I've always loved is so there was this newspaper by Henry Chadwick in 1867 and 68 called the Ball Players Chronicle. And clubs could send in their box scores, their game reports. And so every week, this tiny little town of Parma, Michigan, the Nationals were sending in their box scores. So you'd see the Mutuals of New York and the Athletics, and then you'd see the Nationals of Parma played the Continentals of Kalamazoo. And so that was always fun, and we would always cheer for the boys from Parma. I believe it was you who initiated the statement that there was shouting in the street of Parma, celebration in the street of Parma whenever they would win. So that's always been fun, just looking at their history.
Yeah, it was. I think it was something at one of the times that the Nationals beat the La-di-das or something at the World Tournament. I think the Nationals beat the La-di-das at the World Tournament. I said there will be rioting in the street of Parma right. after this game goes on here. But so the Nationals and the La-di-das, we play each other every so often. They tend to be pretty good games. They tend to be pretty close. We know each other. We know how everybody hits. We know how everybody plays. And so these games, while being a little more relaxed, at the same token, they tend to get ratcheted up a little bit more. But this year we're trying something a little different in that for a select few of the games, the La-di-das and Nationals will be playing by differing rule sets. And so traditionally we play by the rules of 1867, and that's the vast majority of our games. Marcus, can you real briefly here, like, why 1867? What is it about that year that means so much to us to the point where that became our rule set?
The big thing is that when the Henry Ford expanded their baseball program and they wanted to create a tournament. And so there was a large tournament in 1867 hosted by the Detroit Baseball Club. And it was called the World's Baseball Tournament, which to some of our ongoing amusement, they made money available to bring the great clubs from New York and Philadelphia, the Mutuals and the Olympics and the Athletics, and none of them came. So the World's Baseball Tournament, the world included Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Ontario. That was the world. But it was a big tournament. It lasted a week. And so we chose that year and then we branded our tournament as the World's Tournament of Historic Baseball. The other thing, though, that I would highlight why I appreciate that year is that the first formal color line was drawn in baseball to begin the 1868 season. That was when the National Association of Baseball Players ruled that, as they said at the time, no club could have colored members on their team, nor could a club play a club that had colored members, because the National Association was trying to expand into the South. And so they were barring African Americans to try to facilitate their expansion into the former Confederacy. And then the next year, 1869, was the first year of professionalism in baseball. So I'll frequently say that 1867 was the last great year when everybody could play and it was still an amateur game. So that's a little bit facetious in that there certainly weren't a lot of integrated teams, but there were examples of some integrated games before that line was drawn. So those are the big reasons for 67.
Yeah, if anybody ever has the chance, the Saber has put out a really good book about the winter meetings, and the 1867-68 chapters here, which kind of dictates the rules for the coming seasons. You got both the authors right here on this call here. But yeah, I mean, it's 67 really is kind of this fundamentally good year, because there's no gender line either. So theoretically women could play too. So for any teams that have female players, like 1867, yeah, you could. And customs wise, you may not see it, but there's nothing formal that says no women, no people of color. Like theoretically everybody could. So 67 is a good year. It's got good local ties here to Detroit. It's got good cultural and customs ties with regard to inclusivity, which is a big deal that I know the Henry Ford is really pushing for with the Jackson House, which will be opening next spring. So a lot of good things coming down the way here, especially with the 1867 season. That said, we're changing things up a little bit for some select dates and I want to talk about one of them here specifically, and that is our game June 28th. It's a Saturday, June 28th. We're turning back the clock to 1845. So this will be the first time that I'm aware of that the La-Di-Das will have ever played an 1845 rules game. And I know some of our friends on the East Coast are familiar with the 45 rules and do some things around the country with that. So we have an 1845 game on June 28th. On July 19th, the La-Di-Das Nationals will be playing by the rules of 1857. And then Sunday, August 17th, they'll be playing by the rules of 1876, and then all other days will be the 1867 rules. So we're talking about four different kind of rule sets here between 45, 57, 67, and 76 that we'll be playing by over the course of this year. So, Marcus, what is the origins for why we, the Henry Ford, like why would we do that, or why do you think it's important that we do that?
Well, I think for us, this is the 22nd year of the 1867 season. They played 1867 for 1 year. We've played it for 22. And so it's important, I think, to convey to people how the game was changing and that the game did change. It wasn't static. Just the other day, we played a game by the 1864 rules, and we needed to clarify. Okay, how do these rules differ? The game was changing. So I think it's important that we do it to help convey that it wasn't just the game used to be like this and now it's like this and that's all there ever was. You can see the evolution. If we look at those specific dates, let's kind of go backwards. We picked 1876 because that was the first year of the National League. So professionalism had come into place in 1869. The first professional league, which was barely a league, was in 1871, the National Association of Professional Baseball Players. In 1876, it was the National League, which is essentially the same league that we have today. There's been a lot of changes over time, and so that was an important era to highlight the growth of the professional game. Then we chose 1857 before our 1867 because there was a really substantial rewrite of the rules in 1857. That was the year that we established 9 players on a team. Before that, it was not specified. Could be anywhere from 7 to 11 or 12, would have been pretty common. We established 9 innings. Before that, it was whenever a team scored 21 runs, and 90-foot bases. And so if you talked to people, players even in the 1860s would often refer to 1857 as the birth of the game, because it was really when the game came together into a clearly well thought out, designed set of rules that covered lots of things that could happen. If we go back to the 1845 rules, those were a set of rules that were written. We often hear that they were written out by the Knickerbocker Club sort of out of nothing. And we now know that that's not true. There were other clubs. There was a club called the Magnolia Club. Their rules were not written down, but they seem to have been fairly similar to what the Knickerbockers did. But the Knickerbockers were the ones who really made this game a stable thing and brought other clubs into playing over time. And they were referred to as the Nestors, Nestor, the Nestors of the game, which is a Greek historical reference, mythological reference, saying that they were the founders. They were the wise old elder statesmen of the game and the ones who held the game true to its founding principles. And so they developed these rules in 1845. And the reason that they had these rules was it was for exercise. They didn't intend to play other teams. They intended to play themselves. And so you mentioned how we have the La-Di-Das and Nationals, and we try to divide them up so that we have a good game. Well, they explicitly did that. Everybody who would be there to play a game on a given day, it was a game for exercise, they would intentionally split up the people who were there to be 2 pretty equivalent teams, and then they would go play their game. The rules were not very detailed. There's only 20 rules altogether, and 6 of them are about things like showing up on time and what happens if somebody shows up late. There's really only 14 rules that tell you how to play the game, and they're pretty basic. So we're going to be playing among those basic rules, and I promise there will be things that happen in that game that lead us to say, oh yeah, I see why they got rid of that and they changed that rule. I see why they added a rule there, because those are pretty basic rules.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'm sure all of us that normally play the fly game, anytime we ever play a bound game, that's immediately, and that's only like a 1, or in our case, a 3-year difference, but from 64 to 65, you get accustomed to the idea of, a nice solid base hit, in that sense. And here comes the outfielder, just kind of jogs up, catches it on a bounce, and inning is over here. Now imagine going 20 plus years in the past and seeing the amount of change that's going to be there. So Marcus, like, so what would a visitor expect of when they settle down and watch a 1845 rules game? What are rule differences, equipment differences, field differences? What might we expect?
So let's kind of talk about it as you go through the process. Remember the Knickerbockers. They were not a baseball club. The Knickerbockers were a club, and among the things they did, they began to play baseball as a form of exercise. And so there were lots of bat and ball games going back even millennia before the Knickerbockers. But in the games that were really common around, just before that 1845, most of them included what was called soaking or plugging the runner, where you throw the ball at them and you hit them to put them out, which sounds really crazy. Can you imagine that? Until you realize that we still do that in kickball. That's a leftover rule in kickball. And the Knickerbockers got rid of that. One reason was that if you're playing by that rule, you have to have a soft, squishy ball, or else you're going to kill somebody, and which means that ball doesn't go very far when it's thrown or when it's hit. And so by getting rid of that rule, you can have a harder ball, which now makes it more of an adult game rather than a children's game, because the ball's going to sail farther. So they created the idea of forces on the bases instead of plugging or soaking. And then they also created foul territory. Most of the other games were like cricket, where the ball could go in any direction. And so they specified an area in which the game existed, right? And an area outside where the game was generally played. So what's going to happen, remember, this is a club. So the club has a president. And so at the start of a day of exercise, which is what was happening, right? A game was a day of exercise. The president would appoint the umpire. The president would pick who the umpire would be. And then the president would pick who the two captains would be. And then the two captains would go off over to the side, and they would look at, who are the players who are here today, and they would balance it out to make sure they had two equal sides. Not like we do on the old playground, right? Where I pick this person and you pick this person, and then you get down to the two last people to be picked, and it's really embarrassing. They intentionally didn't do that. They had the two captains go over and split the club up into two different teams, and then they just said, here's who the teams are. Then they had a coin toss to say, okay, now that we've decided what are two fair teams, which team are you going to captain, and which team am I going to captain? Team. And then they would do a coin toss to determine who bats first. The bases would not probably have been laid down much in advance. And the bases were not 90 feet. They were 42 paces from home to first. 42 paces from home to second, and from first to third. So the umpire would probably pace out those bases to get the bases laid down. They likely would not have been secured to the ground. There are no rules about bats or balls, about how big they were, what they're made of. We have the sense that they were bigger than we use even in 1867, because there's a pattern you can see in the rules of the ball getting smaller. So we have had some balls made by Corky Gaskell, who has made us balls that we'll be using that are, we think, pretty close to what would have been used in 1845. They're bigger. The bats, no rules about bats at all. The game will be played until somebody scores 21. It's not any set number of innings. So it could be one inning, could be 15 innings. And there's no set number of players on a side. Typically, it might be anywhere from 7 to 12 players on each side. So we're not sure how many people will be on each side, but we'll divide that out once we see who's there on the day. The rules are very limited around a lot of things. It is bound rule in the sense that a ball caught anywhere on the field on one bounce is an out. There are no balls and strikes yet. Those don't exist. So you're just expected to hit the ball. There's nothing that says how far away the pitcher is from home base. but it does specify that the pitcher pitches underhand, not overhand. So we know that that's true. There is a balk rule. So we know that stolen bases were really common. They were moving all the time. And then the last thing, and I want to credit Richard Hirschberger, the author of the book Strike Four, which is a fantastic book if you haven't read it, about the origins of rules. He highlighted for me that there was no tagging up. So if you've got a runner on first and there's a hit to the outfield and the runner runs over to second and then to third, and then that ball is caught, the runner stays on third. There's no obligation to go back. The fact that the ball was caught has no effect on the runner running or the runner's eligibility to run. So it's kind of a loose game. And the part that I think is often pretty fun is the umpire is likely to be sitting in a chair, probably with an umbrella and possibly with a beverage, off to the side of the, off to the side where the umpire normally stands for us, or in that general area. The players are expected to make the calls, and if they can't, then the umpire will make the calls. But he's just sitting there. He may not be paying that close attention even. So he's going to be making the calls just based on what seems to him to be most likely to be right. So the purpose of the umpire had not evolved in the way that it has now, but the rules are very clear that there is no appeal from the umpire's judgment. So whatever the umpire says goes. So it's going to look like baseball, but it's going to be different for sure.
So we'll still be able to follow it, like all players and spectators you'll know that it's baseball. It will still have the same kind of look and feel, but it very much kind of sounds like it's going to be a lot looser, like not nearly as structured. Like
one of the things that was specified in later years rules, rules are always catching up to what's actually happening in the game. And so there's a point where it was added into the rules that runners have to actually touch the bases. And so the fact that was added to the rules suggests that they were not, at least in some cases, that if they went past the base, that was fine, which makes sense because in some of the other forms of baseball or bat and ball games, the bases were a stake in the ground. And you had to run around the outside of that stake. You didn't have to touch it. You had to run around the outside of it. So it would make sense why runners might not touch the bases. They would run around them. But so, there's going to be some looseness in there. And, so imagine a situation where a runner doesn't touch the base and they run on the inside of the base. Okay, the rules don't say anything about that, and there'll be appeal to the umpire, and the umpire will have to say what he thinks is right, just whatever he thinks is the right call, and that's it, done deal.
And there's no questioning, not one bit.
There is no appeal.
So we're looking at again. This is Saturday, June 28th of the La-Di-Das and Nationals, or we'll see if who shows up in what uniforms with that might be. But
everyone is going to be showing up in La-Di-Da uniforms because they were members of the same club. It was one club meeting for exercise, so everybody will be La-Di-Das, and then when we divide them out, we'll probably have one group take off their shields. Off their uniform, so they will be able to differentiate them. But remember, these were all Knickerbockers, so they didn't have uniforms in 1845. So we will have everybody in the same uniform to make it even more confusing.
Yeah. So just to add to it, just to add to the general craziness of what it's going to be, pretty much everybody's going to look exactly the same, and so we're going to be just out there. There might be some soaking going on. There might be people running the bases wrong, or just these are people that are all, trying to, establish this. And hopefully the way that it comes off for our spectators here is you can see where it came from, and then in turn see if you're a regular visitor, a regular spectator for a La-di-Da's games, you can say, now I see this rule was put in place because, Cougar is a dirty cheater who's, undercutting every single base, or, Buck is, as he's pitching, he's trying to, do this or that with some of these things. And so now we have to see why they're doing this. So, it's why the Henry Ford is, what it is, that it is a institution that is committed to learning. It's committed to teaching through living history. And, we'll never know. Maybe we'll see more of these types of games as it progresses here. So Marcus mentioned Strike 4 by Richard Hirschberger. Again, Richard is a very valuable source here. If you go into the Henry Ford or the Greenfield Village's gift shop, you'll also see How Baseball Happened by Thomas Gilbert, which is one that I just got done listening to on audiobook. And he goes into a lot about potential origin stories and, why the origin stories are didn't necessarily happen the way that they're written, and how baseball is not an easy game to pin down with regard to who invented it, and a lot of the rumors and stories that were taken as fact are just that, is just not fact in any way. But that is another time, another story, another day here. Marcus, thanks again for coming on board. We hope to see you all this coming Saturday for 1845 Rules Baseball on Walnut Grove with the La-di-Da Baseball Club getting together, captains kind of choosing out their teams and having themselves a good game of early our mid 20th or mid 19th century baseball here. So thanks for coming on board, Marcus. We appreciate you as always.
Always happy to.
All right. Take care, everybody. Strike well, and we will see you next time you're up on Walnut Grove.